3, 2, 1. Fragments of silicon, useful in both video games and Aztec swords.
Welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. A bit of a format change due to time constraints. We're starting off with the interview. So joining us this week is my cousin, Andrew.
Hey, Adam.
Yeah, hey. It's been a while.
It has been a while. We've both been busy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, just yesterday we had to speak to people from the UK.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Anyway, right. I suppose we should just jump into it. So we'd like to start off by asking people how they got interested in video games. I admit this is a weird one for me because I kind of already know the answer.
Yeah, you were kind of around when when we started video games. I was the one with your brother getting you into video games, actually.
Yeah.
Video games was growing up. I got to, I'm an 80s child, so I started, from the arcades to the home entertainment systems with the Atari 2600. I happen to also be one of the earliest PC gamers. So, I started back in the days when there basically was 4-color monitors and CGA and EGA playing text-based games, and then as I moved forward in my life, games were always a passion. I went to art school for computer animation. I eventually found myself working in 3D animation for film. I worked. My last job was at Pixar. I was there. I was a technical artist there for about 12 years. I started a small gaming company with a couple friends of mine, and we did a mobile game, Fly Hunter, while we were still actually working at Pixar. They allowed us to have what was called a carve out. You can do side creative projects on your own. Turns out we really liked what we were doing, and we sort of got into having a full-time game studio, getting into VR. But it's been a lifelong passion. It's funny. I actually found myself today. I found a emulator online for Pools of Radiance, which was one of my favorite PC games growing up. Circa 1988, and I was actually nostalgically playing Pools of Radiance today, sort of between emails.
Oh, I remember Pools of Radiance. I remember not only you. I remember Eric and Dad playing Pools of Radiance back in the day.
You know what was amazing though? As I was playing it today, it's like the graphics are completely archaic. The mechanics are really sort of frustrating and slow. However, it was still as enjoyable now. You play games like Breath of the Wild and Skyrim, which are exponentially more advanced and complicated, but still that basic reward system, that sort of concept of losing yourself is still exists even for these old.
Yep. I also remember the Infocom games back in the day. Hello?
Uh-oh. It's time to play Has the Guest Lost Their Connection?
I really need to put the Jeopardy music on standby, don't I?
I don't think that's cleared, so no.
Yeah, there we go. We'll try to get him back. He is on a mobile phone, we think, so...
yeah, he told me he was going to be on a mobile phone.
So connection gonna connection.
Yeah, I'm like...
Or as the case may be, not.
It's kind of surprising that the interview yesterday was as smooth as it was, considering, he was talking from Heathrow Airport.
Hmm. On his tethered by his phone.
Well, the
Yeah.
Heathrow Airport is like a federal British thing. I imagine they actually have good wireless infrastructure.
Yeah, but airports usually they're just so congested with so many people they grind to a halt.
Good point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That,
I wish I had a way to ping him, but I don't know if he'd even get the text. Text message, whatever.
Oh, live programming.
Yep.
Hang on.
Yeah, sorry, you got me. Something weird happened.
It happens with cell phones. It's a known hazard of the technology.
I know.
If we had a nickel for every time a technical problems happened on this show, we would,
Have a
have a
budget.
lot of nickels.
Yeah, you know what? Don't feel too bad. I've been at, let's just say, I've been at headquarters of companies who make these online chatting apps,
Mhm.
and it not work at their headquarters. So you know what? It's an imperfect technology.
Oh yeah. We've had other people mention such similarly harrowing tales. Like we have our own tales on that matter as well. But anyway, so where did we leave off?
So I don't know exactly when we got disconnected, but I was finishing up sort of like I was playing today, Pools of Radiance, and what amazed me was still the fact that even though everything, the graphics are completely ancient, it's still from a game mechanics point of view and the ability to sort of keep you entertained and sort of pulled into this story. It's still amazing. So you know, to me, coming from an art background, art is always very important, but still, story and a good gameplay mechanic is still the most important thing.
Definitely. And I suppose we should shift over to what Steel Wool's doing now, which is namely VR. Like,
Yeah, so it was an interesting sort of way in which we actually into VR, to be honest with you. So our first investor, and he's still a partner of ours, Charles Wong. He was the co-creator of Guitar Hero. So he had made his fortune, and he was really just a great mentor. And he called up my partner Josh, and he's like, "Listen, Valve is in town. You want to meet these guys?" So he met with them, and turns out they were talking about their VR prototype that they had up in Washington, up at their headquarters. So we got the invite, and this was I think it was like October, November, 2014. And we went up there, and at this point, we had Josh had a Oculus Rift, the DK1, and VR. If VR was always there was always the promise of VR for us, ever since the 80s, right? It was always a technology that was always on the horizon, but it was never quite close enough to be tangible. Uh, so we went up there a little skeptical, but we thought we'd try it out because the DK1 was great, but there were still some inherent issues with it. They brought us into their demo room, and they ran us both through the demos, and we both walked out and were absolutely stunned by the technology and what they were doing. So we were able to convince them to get us a prototype, and they were going to be demonstrating this their headset at GDC 2015. So it was only a few months away, and we were able to convince them to give us a prototype, and we would do a demo for the GDC show. We got the demo, we got the prototype, and we took. So Josh also owns a tabletop gaming company called Zombie Smith. They do sort of miniatures and game systems. So we took one of his properties called Core, and we did a little demo, a virtual reality demo of what would it be like to see a tabletop miniature game come to life. And HTC saw the demo, and they wanted us to make a game based on that and Josh's IP for the actual launch of the Vive hardware. which was going to be, the following year. And so our first title, so at this point, we did a demo. There was a point, I believe, we were the only Vive prototype in California, which made us really popular. Everybody wanted to come and see it. We worked on that. Quar Battle for Gate 18 came out at launch for Vive. We then decided to do a educational experience because Cher, who is Cher Wang, who is the CEO of HTC, she has a very deep passion for education. So do we. Josh and I, on top of our normal day jobs, we've been teaching forever. And Josh has a background in astrophysics. So we actually had Josh was working on a project, a side project for NASA. So we had a 3D model of the Curiosity rover, and we just decided, I wonder what it looks like in VR. So we threw it. We took the asset, we put it in the Unity game engine, and we checked it out, and it was amazing when we stood next to the Curiosity rover, at real scale size. A lot of people don't realize the Curiosity is about the size of an SUV. So we thought that was the coolest thing ever, and we built an educational experience based on that called Mars Odyssey, and that came out, not too long after Core did. While we were doing that, after we were wrapping that up, we did this prototype of a physics game, right? We sort of decided, like, okay, well, what would be fun to mock up and do something cool? What, physics would be a lot of fun, like having fun with, maybe doing like a Rube Goldberg sort of device in virtual reality. And we came up with the concept of what would be our third game, which was Bounce. And, the one thing that is pervasive, I think, for all of our titles, and I think this comes back from our film background, is everything has a story to it. So, the Quar, even though it's a turn-based strategy game, there is a story, based in the IP. For Mars Odyssey, even there, as much as it's an educational experience, we sort of saw it as almost like the overall concept is like, if we were to do more educational experiences, it would be like the show Quantum Leap. You would just sort of leap into these strange educational experiences and you'd learn things as you go. For Bounce, there's about 50 levels of unique puzzles, and even there is this story that starts. It's very sort of, you have to pay attention as it goes. You start with this cute little sphere that you're trying to save, little robot sphere guy. And, I don't want to spoil the game, but even our physics-based game had a really cute sort of funny story. After that, we had been in talks with Games Workshop because a lot of the artists at our studio are huge, ridiculously huge Warhammer fans. So we decided to do a diorama. We basically built, one of our artists, Davey, built a 40K Space Marine. And, we built a Dreadnought and a couple other pieces. And we just put it in this sort of little diorama set, with flames and looking all super cool. And it's really hard to explain unless you actually see it in VR. VR is one of those things you can't describe until you actually put the headset on somebody. But to all of a sudden be standing next to what you normally see as either, on a monitor or as a miniature, standing next to an 8-foot tall Space Marine who is standing in front of a 15-foot tall, Dreadnought.
Yeah,
so we thought
you'd be suddenly I'm standing right there, staring him in the lower abdomen because Space Marines are freaking enormous.
Yeah, they're huge, right? So, and we made it where you're sort of surrounded by these Ultramarines, and it was actually physically intimidating. And that was what was the interesting part, is your initial reaction, it's fake. It's a video game. However, once you put it in VR, it's these iconic characters that you know so well, but all of a sudden they have a very, very different spatial context to them, and it can evoke certain feelings. So we sent that over to Games Workshop. I just contacted somebody cold over there. They saw the diorama, they thought it was awesome, and we had made a deal to acquire the Horus Heresy uh, IP. This is their Warhammer. It's under the Warhammer 40K universe, but it's basically 30K. It's kind of like the prequel time period. And we were going to do a turn-based strategy game based on their Horus Heresy tabletop game, but in VR and in PC. So we're probably, I don't want to give a specific release date, but it's really soon for early access on Steam. So it'll be a VR title. However, if you don't have a VR headset, that's okay. You can play it in PC mode, and the PC mode is tailored specifically for playing in PC as well. But what's interesting is you can play, since it's a turn-based strategy game, there's no tactical advantage of playing it in VR versus on a 2D monitor if you're playing against each other. So we have the unique ability to play, VR versus VR, VR versus PC, PC versus PC, all player versus player. So that was an interesting thing to do to play somebody who may be seeing the battlefield from a very different vantage point as yourself, but it's still within the same game. And as we're working on releasing the early access for Warhammer the Horus Heresy Betrayal of Calth, we're also, I can't announce specifically, but we're working on another title that will be coming out. The early version of it will be coming out in March, and it will be tied to a film franchise. So we're working with HTC and a film studio on that one. So unfortunately, I wish I could give you guys more specifics, but I can't right now. So that's what has us really, really busy right now. But we like to say, yes, we do VR. That's our passion, but we're a game studio, first and foremost. So, everybody asks us, hey, would you ever do a non-VR game? Like, absolutely, right? There's tons of games I would love to do that may not necessarily work out, would not make sense to make it in VR. So we just happen to be enamored with the technology because I don't think it's a fad. And I don't know, if how many of you or your listeners have tried, a Vive or an Oculus, but it is, once you put it on, you all of a sudden say, oh, that totally makes sense, right? It's one of those technologies you can't describe. You can't watch somebody on YouTube playing it. You have to experience it yourself.
I don't think anyone here currently has a VR headset, since those are quite pricey. But we've had a number of other devs who have worked in VR and
Quite
several
pricey,
types of VR.
yeah.
Because for those who not know, there's actually different levels of VR. Let's call it. Like there's
Right.
the room experience. That's the whole motion, touch controls. That's like the really high end stuff.
Right.
And then all the way down to like the mobile cardboard thing.
Right.
And I suppose my question here is like, what level of VR, like, have you been targeting the high end or sort of the middle of the road here?
We're focusing on sort of the high end experience. I think you're right. There are different levels of strata sort of for the VR experience. The minimal experience is, going into the cardboard, the Daydream, the Samsung Gear. It's cool, but those are sort of what you call 3 DOF experiences, right? 3 degrees of freedom, no real controllers. To really experience, the true virtual reality, you have to sort of go into the more expensive, and it is very expensive to get into it. So it's almost just like it's a luxury item for PC players. But what we see is happening is that it's going to take, we knew in the beginning, this is not something that would all of a sudden be pervasive quickly. It can't be. It's not like, when the iPhone came out, right? Steve Jobs could go in front of, the convention and on YouTube and stream live, showing you what an iPhone does. And everybody sees it on and says, oh, that's an amazing thing. I can see what that is and how you can interact with it. When it comes to VR, the only way to evangelize VR, it has to become a one-to-one experience, right? You have to put the headset on somebody and let them explore it. And that takes time. And the hardware constraints, it is expensive. Now, I will be honest though, the prices for them, even in the period of time of just a little over a year, the prices to get into this have dropped quite a bit. The prices for the headset have dropped, and I see that trend continuing. Right, and I think the biggest expense right now is the actual PC you need to run it.
Yeah, thank cryptocurrency mining.
Yeah, but right, exactly. Unfortunately, right, that's the thing. I mean, I guess it's good for Nvidia and AMD, but still, even then, if you take a step further back, when we first got the prototype, you had to really run the headsets on like a 970 minimum. If you're talking about Nvidia, or 980, and those were expensive cards, very expensive cards. And now, you can get the same experience running, if you're going to stick with the Nvidia, and we have a relationship with Nvidia, we know those guys really well. You can run it off a 1060, which is, it's not. Don't get me wrong; these are not cheap products, but it is their entry level series card now. For the GFX line, the top of the line things. I remember when we first had the Vive in the house, there was no way of possibly getting it to run off a laptop. And in a year period, there are laptops out there now that when we go to conventions, we run most of our demos off of a laptop. So it's the prices are coming down quickly, but it's going to take a while before it becomes a ubiquitous entertainment medium. And we know that. I think Sony's doing a good job on their end. I consider like the PlayStation, the PSVR, it's not what you consider like the full room scale experience, but it's definitely substantially better than like the Daydream or Cardboard. And that's not to knock Google. It's just the fact. It's just the nature of your cell phone is only so powerful, right? Doesn't matter if it's a brand new S8. It's still limited in what it can do. So and I've played some really cool stuff on the PSVR, and I think that is a good way for people to sort of to try out VR first.
Yeah, it's definitely much more accessible than the PC gear. That being said, do you have any personal preference between the Oculus or the Vive?
Well, my preference is with our partners. It's the Vive, because HTC is also they are a partial owner of Steel Wool, and they've been our partners and for a while. But I mean, don't get me wrong. All of our games are ported to work on the Rift as well. We have a lot of our dev work is done on the Oculus Rift. Pretty much everybody at the studio has one at their desk. But from just a pure fan experience, I think it's the nature sort of the hardware, and I think it goes back to Valve, whereas Oculus is using optical tracking, and optical tracking is great, but it's limited. The using the lighthouses, which is they're doing a full room scale tracking. It's much more precise, and it allows you to sort of walk around. We were very lucky actually that we just got a Vive Pro development kit in the studio, and those are hard to come by these days. And so we have a good relationship with HTC and with Vive, and we really like the hardware. So I would say if I am lucky enough to have a Vive at home, which was given to me by HTC, as a developer. But if I had to buy one myself, I would say, I would probably pick the Vive out the gate.
Yeah, other people have veered towards the Vive. I think it's just because it has better room scale capabilities.
Yeah, it does. I mean, you could. Don't get me wrong. I've played on a Rift with the three trackers, and it does a passable job. It's you can definitely move around, but there is nothing as accurate as the Vive. It's just the very nature of the hardware, right?
Indeed. And anyway, speaking of VR, how are you combating the most dreaded of afflictions, motion sickness?
So motion sickness is something that we've had to work. So we have a couple artists. There's one artist, Davey, who is the guy who actually built the Ultramarine. He you put him in anything that is questionable, and he immediately gets queasy. So he is our canary in the coal mine. Um, a lot of the motion sickness has to do with your frame rate. That's first and foremost, right? You have to get a high frame rate. Otherwise, if your frame rate starts dropping and it starts getting choppy, people will start all of a sudden, like, looking for the vomit bag. The other thing is how you handle locomotion. And we've done a bunch of tests, like, the simple thing we've done on a few of our experiences is teleportation, right? So that way you don't force a bad situation on somebody who may be sensitive. What winds up being problematic is when you do sort of typical, WASD locomotion, because what happens is the second you start moving somebody in virtual space and they turn their head and they're not expecting to keep that forward momentum, can turn people a little bit queasy. So there's a bunch of really great titles out there that have addressed this. We've done a bunch of tests. So you know we don't have anywhere near as many issues with people getting queasy than we first did when we first got the prototype. Right. I think a lot of the devs that have been working in the space for a while sort of figured it out. I mean, there's still limitations, but, um, we did, like, prime example, last year we did San Diego Comic-Con and we had tons of people in there, and, nobody that we know of got sick. So
That does fall in line with other VR devs we've talked about. The motion sickness is becoming much less of an issue.
right.
It's just, I suppose the other thing is, like, VR experiences are still pretty shallow for the like dedicated VR stuff.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, it has to. I mean, I think right now it sort of has to be, because the thing is that you want a really deep experience. You can't, it requires a lot of, it's an expensive prospect. Making a really deep game, you want a AAA game, it's a lot of cost. And the thing is that as a developer, you have to say, okay, well, can I recoup that cost? And, if the answer is, well, we're not sure, then you have to make sure that you're very mindful of, how much you're spending. So the number of headsets out there, it's not a huge number. So profitability is not something that's really tangible for a lot of developers. So what you have to do is you got to keep your costs low. And right now, the other thing is, as people are introduced into VR, they tend to we're seeing a lot more people getting in and playing for hours. But when we first started, you could track users and you would say, okay, well, most of the time they're playing 10 to 20 minutes.
right.
And now you're starting to see people they'll play for an hour and more. So they're getting used to being in the headset for longer periods of time.
Yeah, and there are games that are starting to move beyond that. Like, last year we featured a game called Left Hand Path, which is which is quite the substantial experience for a VR title. So it's getting there. It's going to take time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
exactly.
So are you like working in Unity or Unreal?
We are actually both. So unfortunately, has to be the last question. I have to get off the line, guys. I wish I could stay on longer. I have other commitments I have to go. But we started with Unity, and we still work. Our Warhammer title is built in Unity. We are also currently working on UE4, Unreal. There are benefits to both of them. I mean, they're both really, really good engines. Unity was almost necessary when you started in VR, because they had all of the proper SDKs you needed to get the Vive up and running. So it was a lot easier to get into it. And our first mobile game that we made when we were still at Pixar, Fly Hunter, we created that in Unity as well. So we were comfortable with the engine. For the current title we're working on, we wanted to test out the visual capabilities of Unreal, and it's been great. Actually, we've been really enjoying it. So it's I'd say, if somebody was a developer saying, well, I would like to try out VR, which engine would it be? I'd say you could do either one. It's really a matter of, like, are you more comfortable coding in C# or C++, right? And at this point, both engines have a lot of sort of pre-built functionality there as well. So, I think they're both really good choices.
Indeed. Well, as much as I'd like to continue this conversation, we must wrap this up for the time being. But I'm sure we'll have you back on the program, probably
Yeah,
when you announce that other project.
absolutely. So, you know what, Adam, I'm more than happy to come back on, after we announce that, and we can talk. And I promise I'll make sure I give you guys more time.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So the game is Warhammer 40K: The Horus Heresy. Betrayal
Betrayal. Yes.
at class. Yeah. I suppose before we go here, is there any sort of price point you're looking to launch this at?
Not that I am going to disclose right this second, but we have a price point in mind. But we will be announcing that when we go early access.
Fair enough. So look for it soon on Steam Early Access.
All right.
All right. So until next time, take care of yourself, Andrew.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you having me on.
No problem. No problem. Anyway, right. So onward to the news. Yeah, we don't really have transition music from interview to news because, well, it happens, but it happens, very occasionally. So, it makes for an awkward transition.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, really going to dispense with the introductions and let's just get into it. Ogre, why don't you start us off because, well, you've got a new Let's Play to plug.
Yes. It is Lost Vikings 2. After about 8 years, I think, from what people are saying. Keep in mind, that's 8 years, as in a kid was born the day we started, and now he's 8 years old, so... After 8 years, we finally just went back and went like... Well, it's kind of a part of a whole thing where Naka and I are kind of like, what if we just, like, quit tomorrow? Would we be satisfied with what we played? And so we're going back to finish games that we didn't get to for one reason or another. And Lost Vikings 2 is kind of the first one we decided to do, so...
Makes sense to me. I mean, we actually, I don't think the viewers know this, but we actually talked about the Lost Vikings 2 in the writer's room not too long ago. So, not too much of a surprise that it came to the fore here.
It needed to happen at some point, so...
Well, yeah, I mean...
figured we needed an excuse, so there we go, we're doing it. So, yeah, Lost Vikings 2, it should be a while, too, so...
Yeah, it's quite a lengthy game.
Yep,
what I remember.
So far we got into the pirate area, but...
Lost Vikings 2, now with more cybernetics and one less actual character they can play at a time.
I would have liked to have done the PlayStation and other versions, but...
Oh, the Beam software version. Yeah.
There's just... There's only so much leeway on graphics I can give you guys.
Plus the stupid title, Norse by Northwest.
I love it. I completely forgot about that until I looked it up the other day and went like, oh, it's called that? I should have known that from the beginning.
Oh, well. I'm sure you'll mention it at some point.
We will.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, yeah, so we're doing Lost Vikings 2. Got other plans to do a lot of other games we've been meaning to do and get to, so kind of just that year for that stuff. Let's see. Other than that, I got my Wi-Fi card the other day. So far, so good. It's a little wonky because I'm just working with... I have no other way to get it close enough to the actual Wi-Fi outlet other than involves a lot of construction work and wire length that ain't gonna happen anytime soon for me, so. But, yeah, I got that. It's been working out quite nicely so far. So, I can't complain about that. Oh, we actually tried to record with our new headsets, and turns out gaming mics are not exactly recording mics in of themselves.
Different
I mean-
priorities.
Yeah.
Like,
Let's see.
is it time to buy a Blue Yeti?
Yeah, well, that may happen after some point, because next Thursday, I believe, is when Naka and Barry hopefully manage to close on their new house.
Hooray!
Is there any concerns that something would stand in the way?
Nope. There's literally nothing standing in the way for them. It's just that they just have to have some things to work out. There's a inspection
Oh yeah.
and whatnot,
Yeah.
and they're kind of worried that maybe the guy will be like, we found new stuff while we were inspecting the other stuff we inspected, and
So the walls are made out of asbestos.
that'd be
You
worrisome.
have termites in the plumbing, and
As it
I
turns out,
can't think about what the opposite of that would be.
as it turns out, the cockroaches followed them.
Yeah,
Oh,
that would probably happen.
clogs in the wood.
But let's see. So they're going to be moving hopefully sometime soon, and that will kind of precipitate a new recording microphone at some point, for the sake of getting that done and over with. And yeah, the Final Fantasy XIV's new patch launched the other day, so we've all been rushing to do new shit and whatnot, and we were all denied suplexing the train.
Soft
And from what I
crying.
understand, even Savage is not going to have a suplexing train.
Aw.
I demand
No,
a
I-
What is the
recount.
point?
Though I did make a joke about seeing Kian's father on there in the very end. Cyan's family showed up at the end, and I was like, I was joking.
God damn it.
Unfortunately, you also probably can't kill it with a phoenix down.
No,
Nope.
he does a lot of different things.
I
Didn't
mean-
throw a wheel at me though. I'm shocked at that.
Yeah,
I
that sounds required almost.
I don't think he even does it in Savage mode either. But hey, he's my favorite right now. It's
What,
that or the clown, and I don't know about him.
The clown was a clusterfuck though last night.
Oh, that was beautiful. Still surprised we made it before an Enraged happened.
So is this still in the same quest line or whatever?
Basically,
Yeah, it's still the
Omega
Omega.
is kind of like a simulation made of now this time Final Fantasy VI villains.
Okay, because before it was Final Fantasy V stuff, right?
Yeah. And
Okay.
what's next? I have no idea.
I mean, I guess Omega's a robot, so sure, whatever works.
Yeah, to make it sound like it's Omega from the original 5 too, so. Let's see. Other than that, not a whole lot going on, so I'll just pass it on to Petty, because he's probably got something fun to say.
Well, I might be getting a sum of money, but I can't really talk about that because stuff and things and non-disclosure agreements.
Thanks for the assassination plot there, buddy. I mean,
Jesus
have some
Christ,
free
no.
money for some reason.
And
Like-
now I need to go off with some people from the FBI.
Hopefully, it means you can update your computer now.
Yeah, I haven't decided what I'm doing with it. If it's, buy some parts for this computer, or wait for something down the line and build a brand new one. I don't
Like-
know. It's one of those things I have to think about.
Well, who knows when the cryptocurrency bubble bursts?
Yeah. I mean, if anything, my graphics card's still fairly alright. So I can always just wait till that falls out, or, Newegg and stuff actually go with what Nvidia and AMD are wanting, like, offer actual discounts for, gamers and whatnot.
I'm like, I think I saw something about AMD is gonna increase production. I think
Yeah, like-
Nash. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think Nash posted about it on Twitter the other day.
And
And
Nvidia wants retailers to sell more to gamers and less to currency miners, which I approve.
Good luck with that. I'll say good luck with that because the retailers are looking towards the crypto kooks because they're fucking overpaying for this shit and ruining it for the rest of us.
They're buying 4 at a time and paying $300 over MSRP.
Yeah,
Just
like-
because that's the
Well-
graphics cards are capable of churning through a lot of data at once.
Yeah, they can make their money back in about 2 months, roughly.
Yeah.
And then everything after that's pure profit.
I once had a graphics card in my old computer that I did not take very well care of, that the glue got too hot and the fan fell off.
I remember that.
It was really weird. I was playing like Final Fantasy 11 and the graphics went like
Yeah.
Turns out you need to regularly dust your computer, kids.
Oh, I know
Yep.
about that.
Anyway,
But yeah, aside from that, I got Monster Hunter World. Thanks for that, by the way, Ogre.
you're welcome, my former tanking buddy.
I'm gonna miss tanking, though. I'm not a DPS.
Oh, I'm gonna miss you tanking because we actually know what we're doing.
Yeah, I'm worried about Elk.
He'll be fine. Anyway, go on with your news.
Talking about a man who walked into a missile twice.
Slow-moving missile twice.
But yeah, I've been trying to play Monster Hunter when I can. It's interesting. They changed a lot of stuff that I've kind of gotten used to. So I was like, wait, I do what with this now?
Well, and this game is trying to make Monster Hunter into like a survival thing, right?
It's still basically Monster Hunter, but you can you now can change your loadout in the wild, where before you'd have to end the quest, go back to the box, and change your loadout. There you can just go run to a camp. Like, oh, you see, hey, my sword's not doing much damage, but I have a hammer waiting in my box. Go to camp, get a hammer, bash its skull in. And so, yeah, that's been kind of a thing. And other than that, I can't really think of anything else.
Okay. Twilight, why don't you go?
Well, well, today I had to get up early and go to work to receive a perfect attendance reward. And
Because it wouldn't be okay to just miss that.
yeah, yeah, it wouldn't really make any sense for me not to.
Yeah, guys, I'm calling in for that calling out sick for that perfect attendance award. Wait, what?
Yeah. Anyway, speaking of work, they've expanded recently, tore down a wall and put in a new space for products and such. Moved the pharmacy to a new location, and it's weird. So what else? There was something else. That must not be important. Besides that, oh yeah, we've continued our homebrew D&D campaign yesterday evening. It's slowly moving along. Still gotta get schedules better figured out for us to get together. And besides playing games, that's about it.
All
So
right,
next.
Alex.
Not too much over here. Still on a rental car for another couple weeks, probably. I think I'm supposed to get it back in a week, so that's good. Yeah, I don't have too much news.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's fine.
Sorry, I have a little bit of a headache today, so I'm also kind of blanking.
That's fine. I got jack shit for news as well. Like, seriously, not all. It's pretty cold down here. Like, but that's not really news at this particular moment in time. It's hard as fuck to get shit done because just every fucking day.
Mm.
Like,
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to this Friday because we're having a Super Bowl party at work for around lunchtime because I live in New England.
I'm
right.
sorry.
Like, you gotta support the Patriots. Like,
I was brought up with it. New England is very home teamish.
I know. Like, Boston fans are among my most hated sports people. Like, mainly because of that.
Well, you're not in an area that they would start rioting if the Patriots were to win, are you?
No.
All right.
Or lose.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I was in college, there was some loud cheering, but no like.
But you don't have to worry about your car being set on fire or any crazy shit like that.
Right. No, it's just more everybody gets. There's a lot of enthusiasm and decorations and.
Because I know that crazy shit happens over there sometimes. It's just certain areas it's worse than others.
I mean, sometimes, you have weeks where shit don't happen. Which is fine by me because, that often means bad shit. Right. So I think that'll about do it for the news. Right. So, Petty Fan, play us to the topic of discussion. Right. So this week we are talking about the Xbox Game Pass. So the news broke last week that Microsoft is stepping up its game with this thing. And for those who don't know what the Game Pass is, they describe it as the Netflix of video gaming. Which it is functionally, but in turn, like, when you make that claim, there is no gaming streaming service currently that has that kind of gravitas.
The closest thing used to be OnLive, and I was about to say you noticed the used to be there.
Yeah. Well, and before that, like, we've talked about game streaming before, and this is not a new idea. We talked about the grandfather of all of this, GameTap.
Yeah.
A service that was truly I'd say about a decade ahead of its time, considering we're only seeing like viable streaming platforms in the here and now.
Well, and it's important to note this isn't streaming. This is basically what GameTap was. It's you download it to your console. It checks online if you still have the essentially authentication key for it. If yes, it'll open. If no, it won't.
Right. There is a difference because streaming is, streaming. That requires an internet connection.
Streaming is what Sony uses for their, I think it's PlayStation Now service.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if EA Access uses one or the other.
I think on the Xbox, EA Access uses the similar Game Pass thing where it's download and then checks online if you have access.
Yeah. The point of order is, here in the year of 2018, we are now seeing like the promises of OnLive, of GameTap, of whatever other services were out there, being embraced by core constituencies of the video gaming world. we're talking EA, we're talking Sony, we're talking Microsoft here. Like, granted, GameTap was funded by Turner. They're a big conglomerate thing, but they didn't really have a lot of experience in video games. Like, anyway, now why we're focusing on Game Pass in particular is because they upped their game, so to speak, because they've announced that all new releases are coming to Game Pass, starting with Sea of Thieves, day and date. And if you don't understand what this means or why this is so important, it means you can play the latest Microsoft first-party titles
on launch day.
Yeah, on launch day.
They go live on the Xbox Store. You can download them on Game Pass.
Right. And that means just for their monthly subscription service, you have access to the latest and, supposedly greatest. I suppose it depends on the game.
Asterisk, soon to be determined.
Yeah, it's like, and, this is everything going forward. All their, Crackdown 3, State of Decay 2, and so on and so forth, and even future installments in the big franchises, Forza, Halo, and what have you. Everything is moving towards this. And it's not just the Xbox Game Pass on the Xbox. This is also going to the PC Anywhere on PC. Like, granted, that means it's being tied to the Microsoft Store, so good luck there. Like, I'm not going to lie, the Microsoft Store is a bit of a hot mess.
I mean, it's gotten a little bit better, but it's still not great.
No. It's like, it's not, it's certainly not the competitor to Steam that maybe Microsoft hopes it would be.
Hell, it's not. It's mildly better than the Apple App Store or Google Play, but that's purely just on lack of content.
Right. And, okay, speaking of which, this idea kind of hinges on content. I think there's about, 100 games available on Game Pass?
Something like that.
Yeah, it's like, and it's Xbox One games, it's Xbox 360 games. Granted, 100 titles isn't exactly a huge selection in terms of back catalog.
But you have access to all of them for $10 a month.
Right. And keep in mind, what we're basically talking about here is basically a rental service. Like, even more so if you want to get into the whole DRM digital debate. This is explicitly, like, you do not own this. All you are purchasing is access to these things. If you cancel your subscription, you will no longer have access to these games.
Which is kind of always a hazard of digital purchases, but especially when it's this kind of agreement.
Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So keep that one in mind. And as far as changing the landscape of video games, it's hard to say because, well, this is already part of the ecosystem, and it's a good purchase if you're like already in the ecosystem or you want to get into the ecosystem, provided you like what's there. Because once again, if you want example Rare Replay, it's not there.
Well, it's like a big problem the Xbox had in general this generation is there's no big standout things that makes me want to go buy an Xbox over a PlayStation.
Especially if you play games on Steam, because...
Right. I mean, let's not beat around the bush here. Microsoft made some terrible fucking decisions this generation. Some of which they course-corrected quite nicely, like the whole Kinect debacle is behind them.
Or used games debacle.
Right.
But I know I have a friend who works at GameStop, and he said they sold an Xbox One Kinect just yesterday.
Right, but Microsoft.
I'm kidding. I mean, I'm telling the truth, but I'm kidding that means that it's doing well.
Well, Microsoft has officially staked it
Yeah, they're not making any more new ones.
Yeah, so it's, you know, it's not a thing that's really relevant anymore. Like,
Mhm.
but in terms of long-term problems, well, Microsoft's really bumping up against the whole. Yeah, it turns out having games for your system is a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Like
You know,
looking at the PS4 I just got, I can play, a whole lot of really good JRPGs.
right.
Persona being the biggest one.
Well,
Horizon
that,
Zero Dawn was pretty great.
right. Don't conflate third party with first party.
Well, except for Horizon is basically a first
I
party.
know. It's just, Persona is an Atlas game.
Yeah.
It's like, you got to be careful about that. I'm talking about Microsoft's own internal development and producing and all that stuff.
Yeah, like
It's not just like closing down studios. Lionhead got shit canned not too long ago. Press Play as well, but they were an indie. They were a small branch, so less important. But still, like, they didn't really invest in new developers. They had a lot of problems with some of their biggest games. I mean, like, the reason Lionhead went down was um, numerous problems with Fable Legends. Ultimately, like the scuttlebutt was they spent about $75 million on a free-to-play title. Like, and like, one of the biggest collapses was Scalebound.
yeah,
I think
I'm
that's
going
the
to be
one.
honest, that came to fruition. I would have considered buying an Xbox One.
Right. It was hotly anticipated because it was Platinum Games. Uh, they're always they're always a desired developer. Like, and uh, also they've what internal development they've got at this point is, Microsoft likes to favor franchise factories. That
Yeah.
is to say,
Yeah, and those are having, I don't know.
Like the
Well,
only
it's
It
things
like,
you
feels
really
like they're not going as strong as they were
yeah.
a
well,
few
yeah, it's
years
like,
ago.
I mean, other things is they've really fumbled with some of their biggest franchises. Like, I don't think anyone would doubt that, Halo, like Halo, that was their biggest franchise.
Yeah.
You know,
Halo is the reason why the original Xbox made it.
and they've just, continually um, fumble the ball
Yeah.
on that. You know, not just like creatively, but on a technical level, the mess that was the Master Chief Collection. Gears of War. Gears of War 4 launched without much fanfare, and I go back to the whole franchise factory because Microsoft took like this one developer and turned them into the Gears of War studio.
Yeah. Or it's
And
like the only
presumably,
thing that they really have pumping out decent games is the Forza crew.
yeah. Well, even Forza had the loot box
Yeah.
controversy.
Yeah, but
So,
controversy aside, it was still a decent driving game, at least.
so you get all that, and that's why you get shit like, apparently Microsoft's been looking into buying EA, um, according to Polygon, I think. But the point of order is Microsoft doesn't really have the IP depth, nor do they have the games lineup to really sell this
Yeah.
like Sony or Nintendo could. Like, because you like, they don't really have a Halo, Minecraft, a really high level draw right now. Like, I look at the announced games and I see decent titles, but not anything that would that this is the game. This is the game right here. That's State of Decay 2. That's gonna sell outside people on the Game Pass. You know, or like, you have so many first party titles that it'd be best to buy this. They really don't have the quality or the quantity.
Like, the only things really on here are the Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie. Are, like, two of the bigger ones on here. I mean, they have Halo 5 if you really wanted that, but everything else is just kind of old or I can get on other platforms.
Mm-hmm. And as far as the new stuff, well, that's kind of incumbent on Microsoft. Like, now, that being said, this move has had an effect because, well, guess who's getting cut out of this?
Physical retailers.
Right. I guess aside from GameStop, because I do remember I saw GameStop's name attached to this in some fashion, because the battle between brick and mortar and digital is actually not a new one. Like, I remember.
Oh no, they've been.
Yeah.
Video game companies have hated games. First, they hated rentals, and then they hated used sales, and they kind of still hate used sales.
Yeah,
but that's part of the reason why DLC and stuff is so popular.
You can't cut them out entirely, as much as they want to, because they make money off the fucking games, specifically the used games, but they don't make their cheddar on the hardware.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably where they lose money, if anything. And like there's one retailer in Australia that's already said we're not selling Xboxes anymore. And that's one thing that even if everything went all digital, you still need a place to sell the hardware. You still need a place to sell the box.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine that's why, and GameStop in and of itself has been looking to evolve itself beyond its traditional market because they know it's a declining one.
Mm-hmm. Like, just recently, when I went in there, they had a display where I could, buy some games off the eShop, like buy download codes through them. Stuff like that.
And it's also, they have a lot of phone and tablet hardware, and they're also a games publisher. I'm sure not a lot of people knew that.
Yep.
But they've got this subsidiary called Game Trust, which published that Insomniac submarine game.
Yeah, I don't remember the name of it.
Yeah, I don't remember, and I don't care to look right now. Anyway, the point is, yeah, you kind of have to strike that balance because GameStop ain't irrelevant yet.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as how all this is going to pan out, it's a good move on Microsoft's part.
Yeah, this is good for someone starting to get into the Xbox ecosystem. For $10 a month, they have access to a large library of games. Mm-hmm. So you could go to GameStop and throw down $200 for a console, go home, pay $10 more, and you can play a whole bunch of stuff.
Admittedly, after waiting for downloads, but
well, yeah,
that's becoming a thing more when you buy regular games too. So
yeah, like I had to wait for a download when I brought home Monster Hunter. I had to wait, almost an hour before I could even play it, and that was with the retail disc.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, I think that's about where things stand in terms of this service in this moment in time. We'll probably revisit it if things shift forward, so to speak. But yeah, I think that's about it for this topic. Yes, also I know there has been breaking news, about Mario Kart Tour and all that. Perhaps we'll probably talk about that next week.
Yeah, that literally broke as we were getting people together, so we didn't have really time to discuss it. So we'll probably discuss that Sunday and have a more intelligible discussion over it.
Yeah, it's more details will probably come out about everything that was at the Nintendo strategic meeting. It was it was an investor thing, like so.
Mhm.
You know, we'll see what happens in terms of that news. Anyway, that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. Right, the week ahead. So this Sunday we have 2 reviews. I know I think I said 3 previously. Quest
Mhm.
for the Big Key is still in early access. Turns out its release date was for early access.
Yeah, that's when it was coming into early access.
Right. I'm like, this has happened with another game. It's like sometimes the release dates there are not for their actual, this is getting released. It's just the early access release. It's kind of annoying. Anyway, for our final 2 reviews of the season, we'll be taking on a game called Alteric. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a geometric platformer, I guess the best way to put it. Or I guess another way is a really slow version of a hardcore platformer, something like Dust Force or Super Meat Boy. Nothing on that scale of intensity, but you're still doing a lot of surviving, and it's so much fucking slower. Like, more on that in the review.
Like in the sense of more deliberate, or just slower.
More deliberate. It the speed is very much part of the gameplay, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like I said, more on that during the review. I mean, Galax, if you want to purchase it, it's only like $3.
Yeah, I might do that. I already got Quest for the Big Key because that was quite inexpensive.
Yeah, it's like, and the other game is Influence. So this is a bit of an odd one. I'm like, not sure how to describe it exactly. We'll have video footage of it, but it's kind of it's kind of a combination of electroplankton, feeding frenzy, and something like luminous. I know that sounds like a weird mix, but you're playing this thing called an id, and your job is to influence these little sperm things. I know they have a name for them, but it looks like sperm. I swear to God. Anyway, you're supposed to convert them to your color, and you're competing against other ids, and the goal is to get the biggest school, or whatever gathering you want to use here, and beat the other players, absorb them into your collective, and it's all done according to a set of notes. Like, yeah, like I said, it took me a while to get my head around this. That being said, I do have some issues with this game. More on that on Sunday. And coming up on our season finale, so good news. This looks to still be on, bearing last minute cancellations. But on February 7th, we'll be having Dmitry Kalin, Dmitry from Bandai Namco. He's been on the program a few times before. We're going to be talking about Dragon Ball FighterZ, like probably some other games as well, because that always happens. But our focus is on Dragon Ball FighterZ because, duh. This is the reason we're having Bandai Namco at this moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So on that note, I'm gonna wish you good gaming.